The sky burned like a wound torn open by unseen claws. Fires raged across the horizon, lighting the night in hues of red and orange as fragments of Earth's defenses fell from orbit. Streets once bustling with life were silent, save for the hum of alien drones patrolling the ruins. Humanity's greatest cities, London, New York, Beijing, lay in rubble, reduced to scorched skeletons by weapons far beyond human comprehension. Lieutenant Sarah Connors crouched behind a broken wall in what had once been downtown New Denver. The bitter tang of smoke filled her lungs as she adjusted her cracked visor and scanned the area. From her vantage point, she could see the remnants of her squad hiding among the wreckage. Their armor was dented, their weapons low on charge, but their eyes still burned with defiance. A low hum vibrated the ground. The drones were coming. Sarah signaled to her team, a series of sharp hand movements that spoke volumes without words. They fanned out, pressing against the rubble for cover. Her heart hammered in her chest as the first drone came into view, a sleek, insect-like machine hovering 3 feet off the ground. Its single glowing eye swept from left to right, scanning for survivors. Her finger tightened around the trigger of her pulse rifle, but she held her breath. Shooting it would only alert the others. She needed them to move past. Behind her, Private Lee shifted slightly, his boots scraping against loose gravel. The drone's eye locked onto their position, and an alarm screeched through the air. "Move," Sarah shouted. The team scattered as beams of energy scorched the ground where they had crouched. Sarah rolled behind a rusted vehicle and fired. The drone exploded in a shower of sparks, but the noise summoned others. 6 more drones swept in from above, their weapons humming as they prepared to fire. "Fall back to the tunnels," Sarah ordered. Her team sprinted toward the entrance of an old subway station, firing behind them to keep the drones at bay. A plasma bolt grazed Sarah's shoulder, searing through her armor and biting into flesh. She gritted her teeth and kept running. They reached the tunnel entrance just as the drones opened fire again. The last man through the door, Corporal Andrews, slammed it shut and sealed it with an emergency lock. Panting, Sarah leaned against the wall and took stock. They had lost 2 more soldiers in the retreat, leaving her with only 5. Blood dripped from her arm, but she ignored the pain. "Status," she barked. "Low on ammo," Harris said, checking his rifle. "I'm down to half a clip." "Med packs are nearly gone," Lee added, kneeling beside one of the wounded. "We need a safe zone or we won't last the night." "There is no safe zone," Sarah replied. "Not anymore." They fell silent. The truth was hard to ignore. Earth's forces had been shattered within hours of the invasion. Entire fleets had been wiped out before they even reached the upper atmosphere. Ground defenses didn't fare any better. The alien weapons tore through steel and concrete as if they were paper. The Zorth had come without warning. Towering insect-like creatures with exoskeletons harder than titanium, they combined biological resilience with technological precision. They hadn't just invaded. They had studied humanity beforehand. They knew every weakness, every flaw, and exploited them mercilessly. "Lieutenant," Harris said quietly, "we're not going to win this fight with rifles and grit. They're too advanced." Sarah didn't look at him. She already knew it, but admitting it out loud felt like surrender. Instead, she activated the portable computer strapped to her arm. The holographic display flickered to life, revealing maps of the area and satellite data gathered before the grid collapsed. Most of it was outdated, but one blinking signal caught her attention. "What's that?" Lee asked, leaning in. "A relay station," Sarah said, hope igniting in her chest. "The aliens are using it to coordinate their drones and ground forces. If we can get to it, we can disrupt their communications." Harris shook his head. "That's suicide. It's probably crawling with Zorth." "Maybe," Sarah admitted, "but it's our best shot. If we can hack their systems, we can level the playing field, or at least buy time." "Time for what?" Lee asked. "For humanity to fight back." Miles above Earth, aboard the Zorth mothership, Queen Zalrath observed the invasion through holographic projections. Her elongated head tilted slightly as the latest scans came in. Red dots indicated resistance movements, small, scattered, and dwindling rapidly. Her advisor, a drone like Zorth called Zilkath, approached. "The extermination is proceeding on schedule, my queen. The remaining human enclaves will be eliminated within 72 Earth hours." "Good," Zalrath said, her voice a metallic hiss. "Have the adaptation protocols been activated?" "Yes, my queen. The drones are already learning from human tactics. Their strategies will no longer succeed." Zalrath clicked her mandibles in satisfaction. The humans had fought hard, harder than expected, but their resistance was rooted in chaos. Emotions clouded their judgment, driving them to make irrational decisions. It was their greatest weakness. "They are defiant," Zalrath said, studying the patterns on the map. "But defiance cannot alter mathematical certainty. They will fall." Zilkath bowed. "Shall I send additional reinforcements to the southern sectors?" "No need. Their collapse is inevitable. Let the machines finish what they started." Back in the tunnels, Sarah and her team prepared for what might be their final mission. She patched up her arm as best she could, then handed out the last of their supplies. "Everyone ready?" Harris nodded. "Ready as we'll ever be." "Good." Sarah checked her weapon one last time. "Let's remind them that humans don't go down without a fight." They moved out, slipping through the darkness toward the relay station. Above ground, the Zorths swarmed like locusts, but in the shadows, humanity survivors plotted their next move. The invasion wasn't over. Not yet. Sarah and her team crept through the underground tunnels, their footsteps muffled by layers of dust and debris. The tunnels stretched for miles, a network of forgotten infrastructure that had become the last refuge for survivors. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting jagged shadows along the cracked concrete walls. Sarah led the way, pulse rifle raised and eyes sharp, scanning every corner for signs of movement. The Zorth drones had proven disturbingly efficient at tracking down humans who thought they were hidden. Her grip tightened at the memory of the last ambush. They couldn't afford another. "How much farther?" Harris asked, his voice low but strained. He limped slightly, the wound in his side slowing him down. "Another half-mile," Sarah replied, glancing at her wrist display. "We'll come up directly beneath the relay station. That's where we hit them." The others exchanged wary looks. They all knew the odds. The relay station wasn't just a key communications hub. It was heavily fortified. The Zorth weren't careless with their technology, and Sarah suspected this site was guarded by something worse than drones. "Lieutenant," Lee said as they reached a fork in the tunnel, "you really think this plan is going to work?" Sarah stopped and turned to face him. Dirt and exhaustion were smeared across his face, but his eyes still held the same fear she'd seen in every soldier since the invasion began. The fear of extinction. "It has to," Sarah said, her voice firm. "We're outgunned, outnumbered, and running out of time. But if we can get into their systems, we can hit them where it hurts. We break their network. We cut them off from each other. And if it doesn't work..." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Then we die knowing we gave them hell." Her words hung in the air for a moment before Harris broke the silence. "I'll take those odds." The others nodded, determination hardening their expressions. They pressed on, moving deeper into the tunnels. Meanwhile, aboard the Zorth mothership, Queen Zalrath studied the incoming data streams. The holographic projection of Earth showed patches of red, signifying Zorth strongholds, but her focus was on the smaller blue markers, human survivors. The humans were scattered, their forces reduced to pockets of resistance. Yet something about them nagged at her, a thread of unpredictability that defied her calculations. "Zilkath," she said, summoning her advisor. The drone approached, bowing low. "My queen, show me the latest projections." Zilkath tapped at the console, and the holographic display shifted, showing predictions of human behavior based on existing data. Every scenario pointed to their extinction within 72 hours. It is inevitable, Zilkath said. The humans lack the coordination to mount a meaningful counterattack. Their resources are depleted, and their technology is primitive. Zalratha's mandibles click softly, and yet they persist. They are driven by desperation, Zilkath said. It clouds their judgment and leads them to act irrationally. Their strategies are chaotic. Zalrath considered this. It was true that humans operated on emotion rather than logic, but that very trait made them difficult to predict. Despite their inferiority, they had already lasted longer than her initial models had anticipated. Chaos, she murmured. A dangerous variable. Zilkath tilted his head. Shall we increase patrols around the relay stations? The humans may attempt sabotage. No, Zalrath said, her voice sharp. Let them come. Zilkath hesitated. My queen. Zalratha's eyes gleamed. They believe they can challenge us. Let them try. We will make an example of their failure. Sarah's team reached the relay station's access point an hour later. They stood at the base of a rusted maintenance ladder that led up to a hatch. Sarah held up a fist, signaling for silence, and activated the scanner on her wrist. The results confirmed what she'd feared. There's something up there, she whispered. Bigger than a drone. Harris shifted nervously. Guard bots. Maybe, Sarah replied. Or worse. Lee swallowed hard. We're going up there anyway, aren't we? We are. Sarah checked her rifle one last time and started climbing. She moved slowly, her pulse quickening with every step. At the top, she pressed her ear to the hatch and listened. Silence. She opened it cautiously, peeking through the crack before pushing it all the way up. The room beyond was dimly lit by pulsating blue lights. Alien consoles lined the walls, their surfaces alive with shifting symbols. But the most striking feature was the massive machine in the center, a towering construct of metal and glass, surrounded by cables and pulsing with energy. And guarding it was a Zorth enforcer. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall, its exoskeleton gleaming like polished steel. Its multi-jointed limbs ended in razor-sharp claws, and its eyes glowed an eerie green. It turned its head, its gaze locking onto Sarah instantly. Contact, she shouted, diving aside as the enforcer lunged. Harris and Lee scrambled through the hatch behind her, opening fire. The enforcer's armor absorbed the first few shots, sparks dancing across its surface. Then it struck, moving with inhuman speed. Its claws sliced through a console, sending shards of metal flying. Spread out, Sarah ordered, firing at its joints. Aim for the weak spots. The enforcer roared, a sound that vibrated through the walls. It charged Harris, knocking him aside like a rag doll. Keep it busy, Sarah shouted as she dashed toward the central console. She plugged in her hacking device, her fingers flying over the controls. The enforcer turned, sensing the threat, but Lee tackled it, buying Sarah precious seconds. The screen flashed. Access granted. I'm in, Sarah yelled. The enforcer threw Lee aside and lunged at Sarah. At the last moment, Harris fired, hitting it in the eye. The creature reeled, giving Sarah just enough time to activate the virus. A surge of energy rippled through the room. The enforcer convulsed, its limbs locking up before it collapsed to the ground. Did it work? Harris asked, panting. Sarah stared at the screen. It's uploading, but we're not done yet. We need to hold this position until it spreads. Outside, alarms blared as the Zorth reacted to the breach. Sarah gripped her rifle and took a position near the door. They're coming, she said. Harris loaded his weapon. Then let's make them regret it. The battle had just begun. The relay station pulsed with alien energy, its walls humming as the virus Sarah uploaded wormed its way into the Zortha's systems. She could feel the vibrations through the floor, an ominous rhythm that matched the pounding in her chest. The glowing alien consoles flickered, their symbols distorting and rearranging as the virus began rewriting code. But outside, the enemy was closing in, Sarah crouched behind a shattered console, reloading her rifle as Harris peeked through the narrow slit in the reinforced door. "They're forming up," he said. "Looks like 3 drones, plus another enforcer. Can we hold them off?" Lee asked, his voice strained. Sarah glanced at the virus upload progress bar. 56%. "Not fast enough. We don't have to win," she said. "We just have to buy time." Harris nodded. "Let's make every shot count." The first explosion rattled the room, the blast throwing sparks and dust into the air. The door groaned under the pressure as the drones began cutting through. Bright plasma beams melted through the metal, glowing red-hot. Sarah aimed her rifle at the breach, finger hovering over the trigger. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. If they failed here, it wasn't just their lives that would be lost. It was the last hope for humanity. The door burst open, and the drones poured in. "Fire!" Sarah shouted. Pulse rifles lit up the room, bolts of blue energy ripping into the drones. One went down immediately, its casing exploding in a shower of sparks. But the others moved faster, weaving through the debris and firing back. Harris took out another drone before a plasma bolt hit his leg, dropping him to the ground. "Keep firing," Sarah yelled, rushing to drag him behind cover. The enforcer stepped through the breach, towering over the wreckage. Its glowing eyes locked onto Sarah, and it raised its clawed arm. "Focus fire on the big one." Sarah commanded. Lee and the others fired in unison, their shots pounding against the enforcer's armor. The creature staggered but didn't fall. It roared, swiping its arm and sending a console flying across the room. The virus upload hit 75%. Sarah ducked behind cover and pulled out a grenade. She thumbed the activation switch, waiting for the right moment. "Cover me." Lee fired wildly, drawing the enforcer's attention. Sarah stood and hurled the grenade. It struck the enforcer's chest and detonated, engulfing it in fire and shrapnel. For a moment, the creature seemed to falter, but then it stepped through the smoke, its armor scorched but intact. "Are you kidding me?" Lee shouted. Sarah grabbed Harris's spare rifle and unloaded everything she had into the enforcer's joints. Sparks flew, and one of its legs buckled, sending it crashing to the ground. "Now, focus fire." The team concentrated their shots on the weakened joint, and finally, the enforcer collapsed, its systems going dark. "Is it dead?" Lee asked, panting. Sarah checked the virus progress, 93%. "Almost there." "Not yet," she said, reloading her weapon. "We hold this position until the virus spreads." Above Earth, Zorith Mothership. Queen Zalratha's mandibles clicked in agitation as error messages filled her displays. The smooth streams of data she had relied on to control the invasion were fracturing. Drone commands were failing. Coordinates were disappearing, and connections between squads were severing. Zilkath rushed into the chamber, bowing deeply. "My queen, the humans have breached the relay station. They're transmitting a corruption into the network." Zalratha's eyes burned green. "Shut it down?" "We're trying, but the virus is adapting faster than we can isolate it. It's rewriting our communication protocols." "Impossible," Zalrath hissed. "Humans are incapable of such precision." Zilkath hesitated. "It appears they are not following predictable patterns. They've exploited their own chaos." Zalrath struck the console with one of her claws, shattering it. "Send reinforcements." "Crush them." Zilkath bowed and hurried out of the chamber. But Zalrath felt something she hadn't experienced in millennia, doubt. Back in the relay station, the virus upload hit 100%. Sarah's console beeped, and the alien symbols collapsed into static before going dark. The hum of the station systems faltered, then stopped. "It's done," Sarah shouted. All at once, the drones in the room went still, their glowing eyes dimming. The enforcer's body shuddered and then powered down completely. Lee let out a ragged breath. "We did it." But Sarah wasn't celebrating yet. She ran to the console and began typing furiously. "What are you doing?" Harris asked, wincing as he sat up. "Spreading it," Sarah said. "We're piggybacking the virus through their entire network. Every drone, every ship, it's all connected. If this works—" The relay station suddenly shook, and red warning lights flared to life. "What was that?" Lee asked. Sarah's eyes darted to the display. "They're trying to shut us down remotely. We can't let them." Harris shouted. The station shook again, and a new alert appeared on Sarah's screen. "Alien reinforcements inbound." "They're coming," she said, her voice steady. "But so is the virus. We just have to hold a little longer." Lee gritted his teeth and took position. "Then let's make them work for it." Zorth Mothership. Zalrath watched in horror as her displays turned to static. Entire battalions of drones stopped responding. Ships fell out of formation, crashing into one another as their navigation systems failed. Her perfect invasion was unraveling. "No!" she roared. "Reassert control." Zilkatha's voice trembled. "We cannot. The corruption has spread beyond containment." Zalratha's claws twitched. "Humans," she spat. "They're nothing but chaos." And yet chaos had beaten her. Relay station. The explosions outside the station stopped. Sarah waited, her hands still gripping her rifle. Finally, the silence stretched long enough for her to breathe. She checked the displays. Across the network, the alien forces were falling apart. The virus had won. Harris let out a weak laugh. "You did it." Sarah shook her head. "We did it." She looked at the sky through a crack in the station's roof. The alien ships were no longer advancing. They were retreating. Lee sat down, exhaustion overtaking him. "What now?" Sarah reloaded her weapon and looked toward the horizon. "Now we make sure they never come back." The sky above the ruined city was eerily quiet. The massive Zorus ships that had once cast shadows over entire regions now drifted aimlessly, their engines flickering as the virus consumed their systems. Sarah stood at the edge of the relay station, staring up at the crumbling remnants of the alien fleet. Fires burned in the distance, the last echoes of battles fought and lost. Her rifle hung loosely at her side, but her muscles remained tense. The silence felt unnatural, like the calm before a storm. She glanced back at her team. Harris was leaning against a collapsed console, his leg hastily bandaged but still bleeding. Lee stood nearby, scanning the horizon with his rifle, ready for the next wave that might never come. "We should move," Harris said, wincing as he pushed himself upright. "This place is still a target." Sarah didn't respond. Instead, she kept her eyes on the largest of the alien ships, a towering dreadnought that hovered near the horizon. Its lights flickered erratically, and it listed to one side, no longer held aloft by whatever advanced technology had once powered it. "They're not retreating," she said. "Not all of them." Lee stepped closer, his rifle raised. "Then what are they doing?" Sarah pointed. "That." The dreadnought began to descend, its massive form groaning as it fell toward the earth. It wasn't a controlled landing. It was a crash. Flames erupted along its sides, and debris rained down as it plummeted. When it hit, the shockwave rippled outward, shaking the ground beneath their feet. "Is that intentional?" Lee asked. Sarah didn't answer. She sprinted back into the relay station and pulled up the remaining data feeds. Most of the alien systems were corrupted, but some signals were still coming through, encrypted fragments of communication between the surviving Zor forces. "They're not retreating," she said finally. "They're burning everything down." Harris frowned. "What do you mean?" "They're activating self-destruct protocols," Sarah said. "Ships, bases, even their ground troops. They're wiping the slate clean rather than letting us take control of their technology." Lee swore under his breath. "So this is it? They're losing, so they're taking us with them?" "No," Sarah's voice hardened. "Not if I can stop it." She began typing furiously, diving back into the corrupted network. The virus was still spreading, but the Zorth were fighting back, isolating key systems and locking her out. She had moments, maybe seconds, before the entire network collapsed. "Sarah," Harris said, stepping closer, "you can't fight their systems alone. We don't have the tools." "I don't need the tools," Sarah snapped. "I just need time." Lee turned toward the entrance. "We'll buy you as much as we can." The others followed him, forming a defensive line as more drones began to stir outside. The virus hadn't hit all of them yet, and those that remained active were converging on the relay station. Sarah gritted her teeth and pushed deeper into the alien systems. The Zorth firewalls fought her at every step, but she wasn't working alone anymore. The virus adapted, rewriting code faster than the aliens could contain it. "Come on," she muttered. "Show me your secrets." Then she found it, the core command system. It was buried deep within the network, a failsafe designed to override all other protocols. She didn't understand the alien symbols, but she didn't need to. The interface was intuitive, built for efficiency, and that was its weakness. She entered the final command, bypassing layers of security until she reached the central node. A single command flashed across the screen in alien text. "Activate Purge." Her breath caught. The Zorth weren't just destroying their ships. They were preparing to unleash a planetary sterilization protocol, a final weapon designed to ensure no trace of humanity survived. "No," she whispered. Her hands flew over the controls, trying to shut it down. Alarms flared as the system resisted, locking her out at every turn. She was losing the fight, and then she remembered. Rule number 1, the first lesson they'd taught her in the academy: never fight the enemy on their terms. She stopped typing and smiled grimly. If the Zorth thought they were the only ones who could play dirty, they were wrong. Sarah pulled the virus's root code back up and rewrote it on the fly. Instead of disabling systems, she turned the virus into a feedback loop, amplifying its destructive potential. The Zorth network wasn't just going to shut down, it was going to implode. "Warning," a synthesized voice said through the relay speakers. "Critical overload detected." Harris stumbled back into the room. "What did you do?" "I reminded them of rule number 1, Sarah said. "Never fight fair." The ground shook as explosions rippled through the alien fleet. Ships detonated in the sky, their fragments raining down like meteor showers. The remaining drones powered down mid-attack, their systems fried. The Zorth command network had collapsed completely, but the relay station wasn't spared. The overload was spreading through it as well, sparks erupting from the consoles. "Time to go," Sarah shouted. Lee and Harris grabbed what supplies they could, helping the wounded as they rushed toward the exit. Sarah followed, the walls shaking around her. The moment they cleared the building, it exploded in a burst of fire and light. They collapsed in the dirt, coughing from the smoke and debris. When the dust settled, Sarah looked up at the sky. The Zorth ships were gone, their burning wreckage scattered across the horizon. For the first time since the invasion began, the skies were clear. Harris sat up, wincing. "Did we win?" Sarah stared at the horizon, her expression hard. "We survived." Lee let out a tired laugh. "That's good enough for now." Sarah stood, her rifle slung over her shoulder. "Not yet. They'll come back, or someone else will. But next time, we'll be ready." Harris looked at her curiously. "How can you be so sure?" Sarah glanced at the ruined landscape, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Because we learned their rules," she said, "and now we know how to break them." And as the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke-filled sky, humanity rose from the ashes, not defeated but defiant, ready for whatever came next.